Hey everyone. Um, yeah, this is future Corbin here. Um, just coming back to preface the video a little bit. Yeah, so this is kind of a long form. I want to call it a video essay because it's a video, but it's also an essay. But it doesn't have like much, if anything at all, like edited over it because I mean it's not a movie review, right? There's no footage to put over it. It's just me talking about something that means a lot to me. So, yeah, it's a little unorthodox, but I hope you enjoy the glorious asymmetry of my V-neck T-shirt and the video as well. Enjoy that equally as much as the T-shirt. All right, I'll catch you later. It is an opinion of mine, and I'm assuming the people who made Midsommar, because how else would that movie get made, that many people, at least in the West, lack the vocabulary, understanding, and comfort with vulnerability to properly discuss and validate both our own emotions and the emotions of others. We're a very materially focused society, which, while I think we've certainly been improving in recent decades, is still massively hindering us on the mental health side of things. And part of this, and you'll forgive me for getting slightly English professory here, is I think the philosophy of modernism. Now, to sum up a very complicated topic in a couple words, modernism is sort of the idea that everything is solvable, that by like using our tried and true skills of rationality, logic, and science, we can slowly order the universe to our liking and just generally keep on improving and improving and improving and so on. Now, that's not everything that it is, but it's what's relevant here. It's an idea that sort of blew up after the Industrial Revolution when we were just generally getting shit done on a more massive scale than we had ever been able to do before as a species. So we were all just kind of like in that mindset, like, yeah, let's fucking go, humans, man. We're getting up there, bro. We're turning it up, and like it's not a bad mindset to have. You know, it's optimism, but optimism has its limits, and it can get toxic pretty quickly if it's used as an excuse to ignore problems. And you can see how something very complicated and massively misunderstood, like, say, human emotional responses, might make people who believe in, or at least internalize these ideas of modernism, a tad uncomfortable, because we haven't solved human emotion yet. We haven't figured out, we haven't reduced it to a formula, we haven't ordered it to our liking. It's we can forgive ourselves for not having solved the physics of the universe yet, right? Or for not like having enslaved the sun to our will, because that stuff's all larger than life. But our own brains, that seems like something we should have had under control by now, right? I think a lot of people try to ignore their emotions for the sole reason that they don't really make sense, at least at first glance. People seem to try to convince themselves and the world that their inner environment is functioning pristinely, just like a well oiled machine should, when really they have no fucking clue how it's running, haven't checked in years, and are afraid to check now. Like, we generally like to believe that all things are solvable and that our emotions are just things that we ultimately have control over. And while I don't think that is necessarily false, I'm sure we do ultimately have control over emotions. I don't think very many people have really figured out how to operate those controls. I think they're trying to believe they have, when really they're either suppressing them or being consumed by them. Because the truth is, emotions are fucking scary. They literally warp the way that we perceive reality, which can really endanger that sacred idea of rationality and order that so many of us humans cling to because it feels safe to us. Christian. Christian from Midsommar is what I said, in case you didn't hear me. And I think that fear of losing our sense of control over our reality and feeling like there's something wrong with us is what typically makes us so uncomfortable around the expression of intense human emotion, and what drives us to sometimes just dismiss them as expressions of psychological weakness. It reminds us that we might not be in control or as put together as we think we are. We do not have good small talk language at the moment for discussing the more serious aspects of mental health. Like, you don't bring up in your first conversation with someone that you were seriously struggling with depression. It's just not something that is socially incentivized in our society. In my experience, people generally don't like hearing about other people's pain unless it's coded in positivity with promises of solutions that are already in the works. Like, our society is so solution oriented that to mention a personal problem and then just leave it hanging with no immediate solution presented, it seems to impart upon the listener some sense of responsibility to fill that void of solutionlessness, even when the problem, like, obviously isn't their fault. And when we don't know a solution, or like don't feel qualified to give one, or aren't even sure that there is one, it tends to make us uncomfortable existentially, and discomfort of any kind typically makes us try to avoid people who cause it in us. It's just something that humans do. And this is unfortunate for people with mental health issues, because while we are in desperate need of emotional validation, we are also terrified to scare people away. So we mostly do the polite thing, Danny, and keep it to ourselves. I think one of the reasons that modern humans are so scared of problems without visible solutions is because our society is so individualistic. This is something that also comes up tangentially in Midsommar. There's a lot of great themes in that movie. That's why I wanted to talk about it. Now, individualism is not a bad thing, just like modernism is not a bad thing. There are lots of advantages to the emphasis that modern society places on the autonomy of the self. I like individualism. But that doesn't mean that there aren't also disadvantages, that we didn't go maybe a bit too far when the pendulum swung away from collectivism. I think in our noble effort to pursue our own individuality and agency, we got a bit too attached to our sense of self and to the borders that supposedly separate us from all the other selves out there. And now we cling to our negative emotions, afraid to release them into the collective because we don't want to admit the failure of our own self as a self-sustaining entity who can solve all of its own problems. But that's the problem. We aren't self-sustaining entities. I mean, I won't say that we can't ever be because, the future, but for the foreseeable future, and all of history, by the way, we aren't. And here's my proof. Are you ready? Loneliness. There are more humans on Earth than there have ever been, like on an exponential scale, and yet this is the loneliest generation in human history. Individualism brought a lot of great things to the table. We got free will, we got individual pursuit of happiness and purpose. Love that stuff. But I think we forgot about a key element of our old collectivist ways that probably helped us quite a bit during all those millennia where we had literally no idea what the fuck was going on, because for the massive majority of human history, we were just guessing about why we existed in this fucking paradise. We had no idea it took us hundreds of thousands of years to try to scrape together enough collective knowledge to learn what we now know about the universe we live in. Objectively, we have never had more certainty, more order to the universe around us than we have now. So why does uncertainty still scare us so much? Possibly even more than it did throughout our entire history. To be fair, one cause of this might just be that we've gotten spoiled by the advancements of recent times and don't like to think about how much we still haven't solved. That's a valid theory, that makes sense. But there's another potential cause here that I'm more interested in talking about, and that is that we are lonely. And we didn't really used to be. It's hard to sit in that void of existential uncertainty that negative emotions create in us, especially when we're alone there. While it doesn't seem to make logical sense, it is undeniably easier to face uncertainty brought about by pain or circumstance when there are other people standing with you facing that same uncertainty. Like, think about it for like 3 seconds and you'll admit it. Like, being together just, it comforts us. It doesn't solve anything. The uncertainty of our pain is still there, and you're not any closer to an existential answer than you were before, but you're not alone. And for people like me who are compelled to constantly ask why about everything, it took me a while to figure out why my brain, and others, I assume, are like this. Why does it soothe us to have more bodies around a problem, even when the problem is still there afterwards? Why does it make us feel better to know that other people see the pain, know the pain, feel the pain themselves? Why does any of this bother us at all, when philosophically we can never really be certain about anything? Like, why are our brains like this, so twisted together in like loops of bad logic? Like, why? I tried to look really deep into myself and follow my own patterns of thought and emotion to try and get to the bottom of this. And here's what I eventually came up with, again, based on my own experiences. Emotions shape and color our reality. So, you can see how not being in control of our own emotions can often feel startlingly equivalent to not being in control of our own reality. It's no wonder then that we often try to ignore strong negative emotions. Not doing so can lead us, or me, down a very dark rabbit hole where our brain quickly jumps to some really scary existential questions. Can I trust my own thoughts? Am I thinking and feeling what a properly functioning person should? Am I just failing as a conscious being right now? Why is this happening to me? I don't like it. Why? When sinking into the void of existential uncertainty, the self starts to become something untrustworthy, a machine with no means of determining whether it's running on the right operating system. It's like, am I functioning right? I don't know. This doesn't feel right. And that's why I think it helps to have other people around us, especially those who know how to validate emotions, because if there's another presence in that void standing with you, something acting independently of your own influence, your presence there is suddenly justified. The situation you're in is justified. That person's operating system also took them here, meaning you're more likely to be up to date, so to speak. So you haven't failed as a conscious being. You're just as valid and valuable of one as that person that's standing next to you. And that person, they didn't try to solve your pain or, convince you it's not as bad as you think. They just joined you in that place, saying, yeah, it does feel that way. Yeah, I agree. I'm there too. It's a thing. Want to get some lunch? when we allow our pain to be seen by other people, it gives other people the chance to be present with us and what we're going through, to show us that they're not above such pain either, that it's universal. And when that happens, uncertainty about ourselves becomes bearable again, sometimes even irrelevant, at least for the time being. And the fact that actually solving the problem wasn't necessary for this really tells us something. I think we are often less concerned about solving difficult problems than just knowing that other people also can't solve them. And that sounds kind of bad, right? But I don't think it's because we all secretly want everybody else to be as much of a failure as us. I think it's more along the lines of we want to know that we are still as good as everyone else. And we can get that assurance through genuine emotional communication. This is exactly what we see Dani discover at the end of Midsommar. She's finally able to process her pent-up emotional pain because the Horgans know how to sit with her in her existential panic and help her to feel less alone there. And I was honestly jealous in that when I was watching that scene, because our society has no idea how to do what those Horgans just did for Dani. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if every human on Earth could just take a moment and be genuinely with you in your pain? Imagine that for a second. Like, actually, try to. Feel that wide-scale validation that you would feel if everyone joined you for a moment. How strong you would feel, how real, how justified. It's hard to put into words. It's a really primal human need being fulfilled. That assurance that your experience falls within the set of valid human experiences. It'd be nice if our society could do something about that. But there is an individualist counter-argument that arises here. Why should we change our society to accommodate the idea that we need other people's validation to justify our own experience? Isn't that kind of an unhealthy mindset to perpetuate? Shouldn't we instead focus on improving people's self-esteem to the point where we're no longer so reliant on other people's validation? The thing is, while I don't agree with these questions, I do agree with the underlying sentiment, because I believe that all human experiences are valid, regardless of whether other humans validate them. I think that's a very beautiful truth that can be very existentially comforting. I also believe that we can work to make ourselves less reliant on the validation of others by, slowly reshaping the landscape of our brain through tactics like therapy and mindfulness, and stuff like that. But there is one thing that we can't change. Not now, and maybe not ever. Humans don't just need social connection when we're in pain. We need it to maintain our sanity. We are biologically reliant on having our experiences validated by other humans through fulfilling social connections. Now, let's be clear here. You don't need anyone else's validation to be a valid human being. You will always be a valid human being. But we all need it, at least to a certain extent, to feel like one. And that is just something we cannot change. When we don't get the amount of fulfilling social interactions that our brain would like us to, we start to doubt the validity of our own experience. And that is called loneliness. Even the most self-assured person on Earth will get lonely if they're alone for long enough, unless they're like, there's literally something wrong or different about their brain. Like, the typical human brain is programmed to get lonely. And that's because it is literally built into us to use other humans as a touchstone for validating our own experience. Now, we may not like the way that we're made, but it is what we're stuck with. There is no point whatsoever in trying to fight the necessities of our own biology, other than to actively make ourselves less happy. And I think that any changes we make to society to accommodate these necessities can only serve to make us a happier, more productive society overall. So, the question remains, what changes can we actually make to our society? What does making changes even mean? Does it mean starting like a grassroots movement? Does it mean everyone like individually trying to improve the way they respond to other people's emotions? I don't know, man. I'm not an activist. I don't know how to make real change. I wish I did. I wish I was more knowledgeable about this. Maybe I will be someday. We'll see. But at the moment, I'm more of an idea guy, you know? That's why I want to make this channel, because I want to promote or spread ideas like this. And I think that's one legitimate way to help. It's the way I know how to. But I also do think that one good suggestion I can make is to just make a conscious effort to reassess the way that you emotionally communicate with people. I mean, if you can show someone else how to do it, there's the potential of you passing the skill on. And it doesn't have to be as extreme as, like, the Horga in Midsommar, where you're, like, holding people's hands and, like, screaming with each other. Like, you can just try to be a bit more conscious about how you engage with people about topics that might be a bit sore to them for whatever reason. Just make that extra effort to really try to feel whatever emotion is scaring them, and then if they're open to it, you can try to empathize with them a bit, help them feel a bit less alone in that void. Just try not to turn away from their negative emotions, or from your own, if you can help it. Part of it, I feel like, is being aware of where you personally stand in terms of comfortability with emotional dialogue. I've come up with kind of an unnecessarily complicated ranking system for people's emotional dialogue skills that you can try to place yourself in. We've got 5 tiers here. At the lowest spot, we've got tier 5s. These are the people who, you know, they're the ignorant ones, the ones who actively belittle other people's emotions or look down on them because they think of any emotions other than positive ones as a weakness. You know, tier 5s are usually not great at empathy, and they can be really harmful to both themselves and to people who look at them as role models, or, you know, just usually bad for anyone involved with them. If you're a tier 5, there's no way you're still watching this video, so unfortunately you'll have to be reached by other means. Tier 4s are the next level down, and this is a very highly populated tier. A tier 4 is what I would call someone who isn't actively hostile toward other people's emotions, but also doesn't really want to have anything to do with them, and basically tries to ignore or avoid them whenever possible. This is what I would classify Christian under from Midsommar. He basically spent the whole movie ignoring Danny's emotions because they made him uncomfortable. Tier 3, I'd say this is where maybe a majority of our society is at right now. Maybe. It might be tied with tier 2. But tier 3s, they're the people who are comfortable enough with negative emotion that they can acknowledge it, but they're still pretty uncomfortable with the idea of not having a solution to it. So their impulse is to try and fix people's emotional pain with material solutions rather than just validating it and, you know, to avoid the underlying issues, which it's a nice sentiment, but it can be kind of annoying since it doesn't often help that much and can kind of detract from the main issues. So yeah, middle ground. Tier 2 people are almost there. They're at the point where they can fully acknowledge emotional issues. They've realized they can't solve other people's pain, but they also don't know how to validate it very well yet. So, tier 2s often end up offering some sort of like semi-awkward apology for what you're going through, which definitely comes from a place of kindness, for sure. But you can usually tell that they're still a bit uncomfortable, that they don't have a solution to offer you, and that can make the dialogue a little stilted sometimes. So, yeah, tier 2s are almost there. Tier 1s are hard to come by. Now, to be fair, people float in and out of these different tiers all the time, depending on their own emotional state, and I know a good number of people who have reached tier 1 status at select points in time, but I'm not sure if I've ever met someone who maintains it on a consistent basis. I'm not even entirely sure what defines a tier 1 in our society, to be honest. I almost feel like our society would have to be completely remade to have like enough evidence to say exactly what a tier 1 is. But I guess I could say that it's someone who's able to make people feel completely at ease with their painful emotions by themselves being completely at ease with painful emotions. I think one of the most important things you can do to aspire to be a tier 1 is to try not to let other people's emotional pain make you uncomfortable. And I think it's important to try to curb this reaction in us, because if you give off the impression that someone else's emotional pain is making you uncomfortable, they can often jump to the conclusion that they're just being a burden, and then that discourages them from opening up more. Try to remind yourself when you have that reaction that it's probably just you feeling like an unconscious urge to provide a solution due to, pressure from our solution-oriented society. In reality, there's no pressure whatsoever for you to offer a solution. Because, and this is very important, you definitely don't have one. All you can do, realistically, is just be present with them. Allow them to express their emotions how they want to, and then try to just casually validate them without making a huge deal about it. Make it clear that their pain is not a nuisance to you, and that there's absolutely nothing wrong with them for having it. Physical touch can help with this sometimes, if it's done in a wholesome, friendly way. But unfortunately, because of all the gender stereotypes and social taboos in our society, casual physical touch isn't super normalized at the moment, so we can't often utilize that one to its full potential, in my opinion. Shouting together like the Horga also might not be appropriate very often, especially in just casual conversation. I think it'll be a while, if ever, before anything like that is normalized, but you could use it with people you know really well. Give it a go. Give it a try. The point right now is really, I guess, just to get yourself thinking about this. You don't need to be mad at yourself if you're not the tier you want to be, because a lot of other people are going through the same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and validate your experience on that right now. Almost everyone in our society has work to do on this. I'm definitely not a tier 1 yet. I strive to be, but I just don't have the confidence in my own self-worth yet to feel fully comfortable validating other people. Now, is that a logical inconsistency? Yeah, for sure. Logically, I should be able to help validate anyone's pain, because my low self-esteem doesn't lessen my human experience, and yet I still have to fight that battle so I can gradually convince my subconscious that I'm not worth any less than anyone else. And everyone has their own demons like that, preventing them from being as good as they could be. We're all together in that. And I think that's how we should approach this, with self-forgiveness, open collaboration whenever possible, patience, but above all, honesty. Try to be honest with yourself about what tier you're really in, because it is worth it. Even the people who this video seems fucking pointless to, who don't have any problems with the current society because they think they're getting everything they want out of it, they will benefit from this. Nobody stands to not benefit from this. Restructuring our society to properly satisfy our biological needs can only make us happier, more empathetic, more collaborative, more productive, more likely to survive as a species by any metric or worldview that you look at this from. The end goal is something that benefits you, whether you currently believe that or not. So, yeah, that's my case. There'll be a part 3 to this series where I really dig into some more philosophical questions about loneliness. I think it'll be pretty cool. So, tune back in for that if you are interested. Otherwise, see ya.